Well, hi everyone. Welcome to the Hard Answers. I'm Tom Graham. History. In 1929, the Soviet Union established gun control. From 1929 to 1953, about 20 million dissidents, unable to defend themselves, were rounded up and exterminated. In 1911, Turkey established gun control. From 1915 to 1917, 1.5 million Armenians, unable to defend themselves, were rounded up and exterminated. Germany established gun control in 1938. From 1939 to 1945, a total of 13 million Jews and others who were unable to defend themselves were rounded up and exterminated. China established gun control in 1935. From 1948 to 1952, 20 million political dissidents, unable to defend themselves, were rounded up and exterminated. Guatemala established gun control in 1964. From 1964 to 1981, 100,000 Mayan Indians, unable to defend themselves, were rounded up and exterminated. Uganda established gun control in 1970. From 1971 to 1979, 300,000 Christians, unable to defend themselves, were rounded up and exterminated. Cambodia established gun control in 1956. From 1975 to 1977, 1 million educated people, unable to defend themselves, were rounded up and exterminated. All totaled, 56 million defenseless people were rounded up and exterminated in the 20th century. And because of gun control, they weren't able to defend themselves. You won't see this data on the U.S. evening news, or hear politicians disseminating this information. Guns in the hands of honest citizens save lives and property, and yes, gun control laws adversely affect the law-abiding citizens. With guns, we are citizens. Without guns, we are subjects of the government that can bestow and take away our rights. One lone, insane individual with a gun may kill a few dozen, maybe even 30, 40 innocent people. But unchecked, governments kill millions of people. Before Hitler and before the Cold War, all the OECD countries of the world looked to Germany and the USSR as role models of efficiency. Hitler was Time magazine's Man of the Year in 1938. And then an unarmed citizenry in both places were massacred by their governments. What makes naive people think such a thing couldn't happen today? Law. The Second Amendment. The Supreme Court on several occasions has stated that the right to bear arms for protection and defense was a human right long before the United States was even dreamt of. The Constitution does not give anyone the right to bear arms. It simply acknowledges that the right exists and that the government should not infringe upon it. Getting rid of the Second Amendment will not take away the right to bear arms. Gun registries. Canada recently attempted a long gun registry, a registry of all rifles and shotguns in the country. They already had a handgun registry. They estimated that there were about 8 million long guns in private hands. Legislators were told that the registry would cost something like $119 million to implement, about $15 a gun, with $117 of the cost covered by registration fees. So for $2 million out of pocket, they'd be able to register all 8 million guns and it would go quickly. The law passed in 1995 with licensing starting in 1998, and all long guns were supposed to be registered by January 1st, 2003. By the year 2000, it was obvious that it wasn't going according to plan. Registrations were backlogged and riddled with errors, and costs were way over estimates. An auditor in December of 2002 showed that the costs were going to exceed $1 billion by 2005, with an income from registration fees of only $145 million. And then there was the lack of compliance. By January 1st, 2003, only about 65% of the estimated 8 million firearms were registered, and there was no reason to believe that the other 35% would ever be. Finally, in 2012, Canada scrapped its long gun registry after dumping an estimated $2 billion into it, about $250 per gun. It solved no crimes, it prevented no crimes, and it took vast quantities of money and manpower away from law enforcement with its implementation. This is not an isolated incident. Something very similar occurred in New Zealand. They abandoned their long gun registry in 1983. Extrapolate that to the US, where the overwhelming majority of gun owners believes the Second Amendment's "shall not be infringed" clause actually means something. Our firearms pool is 37 times larger than Canada's. Our population is far more likely to disobey such a law or creatively troll it. Statistics. A 2008 study ordered by the Center for Disease Control and conducted by the Institute of Medicine and National Research Council found that while there were about 300,000 violent crimes involving firearms in 2008, the estimated number of defensive uses of guns ranged from about 500,000 to more than 3 million per year. So if you ban guns, yes, you'll get rid of about 300,000 violent crimes committed with guns, but you'll also be responsible for an increase of up to 3 million other violent crimes that are prevented each year by legally brandishing a firearm. The Institute of Medicine and National Research Council also says whether gun restrictions reduce firearm-related violence is an unresolved issue. Studies that directly assess the effect of actual defensive uses of guns have found consistently lower injury rates among gun-using crime victims compared to victims who used other self-protective strategies. There is empirical evidence that gun turn-in programs are ineffective. Science. The United States is the most diverse population on the planet. If you look at the violent crime rates of all the countries in which our population claims national heritage, and then prorate that number by U.S. population demographics, you would expect the U.S. to be far more violent than it actually is. The fact of the matter is that U.S. values, governance, liberty, opportunity, and most importantly, capitalism promotes nonviolent behavior and cooperation. Society. Our society is divided on the meaning of the Second Amendment. Half of us think that it's there because states used to have citizen militias who needed to be armed, and we just aren't that society anymore. We have the federal military and the state military, which is the modern-day militia. Many of these people believe citizens should not have guns at all, except for the police. The other half just wants a gun to protect their homes and their families, because the police are always 20 minutes away when a home invader breaks in. Many of the other half also have a sense of history and sees that many governments throughout history have used military force against their own people. Between the Germans, the Chinese communists, and the USSR communists, 53 million people were killed in the 20th century. Just by those three governments alone. These people believe that it would be naive and short-sighted to allow the government to disarm the people, especially with political ideologies getting more and more diversive after each presidential cycle, and some members of certain groups becoming more and more violent and destructive. Antifa. My opinion. The gun show loophole means that any individual who is not a licensed gun dealer may sell a firearm to any unlicensed resident of that state where they reside as long as they do not know or have a reasonable cause to believe the person is prohibited from receiving or possessing firearms. In my opinion, the individual sale regulation is a bit too vague, and as long as the state provides a quick, easy service for citizens selling firearms to get background checks for free and over the phone, then background checks are a must for all firearm sales. All firearm sales. Of course, no amount of regulation is going to stop an illegal purchase, but at least we can stop legal sales to people who shouldn't be buying them in the first place. However, that is the only thing that I think should change. There should be no gun registry, any more than there should be a screwdriver registry, or a computer and software registry, a power drill registry, or a kitchen knife registry. If I have passed a background check, then the government has no right to know what I have purchased legally. The principle of lethality and the principle of concealment are the two principles that should govern all weapons regulations. The more lethal a weapon is, the more it should be regulated. A thermonuclear warhead should be regulated quite a bit. It ought to be incredibly difficult to own one. Apache attack helicopters with anti-tank cannon and Hellfire missiles. A little less regulated than a nuke, but still pretty hard to get. And down the line through jets, drones, missiles, tanks, and finally fully auto rifles versus semi-auto rifles. All semi-auto rifles should be as easy to get as a semi-auto handgun, because they are just as lethal relative to the more lethal tools. Handguns and other concealable guns should be regulated a little bit more than long guns, since they are statistically used to commit crimes at gunpoint hundreds of times more than non-concealable guns. How should guns be regulated? Exactly how guns are regulated today, except for the addition of background checks for all firearm sales. Please click the subscribe button to see more videos like this. If you disagree with me, please leave a comment. My ears are always open, and I learn new things every time someone disagrees with me. I'm Tom Graham. I'll see you next time on The Hard Answers.